He said what?
Oh, I was there, hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did, a royal wedding I ever did. And I travelled the world with him, and I did really enjoy working with him. But, you know, now I really don't care if I ever see him again, because the way he's behaved towards the king and our queen and his brother and his sister-in-law is appalling.
Forget the fairy tale they showed on TV. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's royal wedding was not really a celebration. It was more like a circus, set up carefully just for the cameras and to grab celebrity headlines. The shiny carriages, the music, the fancy guest moments, all of it was staged like a show.
Delivered it like an actress delivered it, an opera responded going, wow.
Behind the scenes, royal photographer Arthur Edwards said it was full of chaos, discomfort, and clear disrespect for royal tradition. Guests were sweating under the burning sun, squeezed into heavy coats and dresses while trying hard not to pass out. Important royals who had spent decades serving the family were pushed to the back rows. At the same time, Hollywood unknowns and Meghan's friends from the industry walked around in the best seats like it was their own fashion runway.
No, and then Oprah Winfrey had met them once. She was a guest. The Clooneys, the guests. I mean, never met them before, but they were the guests. And, you know, I thought to myself, this all showbiz rubbish.
Even the press, the same group that helped make the wedding such a big show, got treated badly. Harry would not look at the cameras, on purpose avoiding every moment, making photographers rush around like they were trying to snap pictures of a star hiding from paparazzi. Arthur said he could not get even one good photo. It was the only royal wedding that ever turned out that way.
I was angry, and I felt we were punished for that. In fact, I never got one picture in the paper published from that day.
And Meghan acted like it was less about two families coming together and more about showing off her personal brand. Forget about love or unity. It felt more like a launch party than a wedding. What the world thought looked like a fairy tale was really just a carefully built illusion, and not a pretty one. On TV, everything looked perfect. Flags waving, choirs singing loudly, celebrities shining. Millions of people believed they were watching a modern royal love story happen live. But the people sitting right up close did not see magic at all. They saw misery. The mood felt heavy, not romantic. Guests were stuck inside Windsor under burning heat, forced to sit for hours as sweat ran down their fancy suits and dresses. Women held fans like they were saving their lives, with makeup melting and tempers growing short. This was not elegance, it was survival. Edwards himself called it the worst royal event he had ever worked.
I was there, hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did, a royal wedding I ever did.
He had gotten through decades of big royal events, from Charles and Diana to William and Kate, but he said nothing came close to this disaster. The issue was not the weather. Royal weddings had gone through rain, wind, and heat before. What made this one different was the complete lack of care. It seemed like the comfort of the guests did not matter at all. The only thing that counted was how it looked for cameras broadcasting to the world. Smiles shown on TV were hiding exhaustion and frustration behind the scenes. The day that was supposed to be joyful ended up feeling like a hot and uncomfortable endurance test.
I was determined to keep the newspapers away from it as much as possible. Everything was done on long lenses. I mean, I tell you, I had an 800mm lens photographing the guests.
A fairy tale for the people watching at home, yes. But for the ones stuck inside, it was almost impossible to bear. If the heat was not already too much, the seating plan added even more embarrassment and turned it into a headline. Years of royal service suddenly meant nothing. Important family members, military veterans, and senior royals, the very people who had carried the monarchy for so long, were pushed aside and left in the back rows like they did not matter. At the same time, Hollywood stars, many who hardly even knew Meghan or Harry, walked right into the best seats at the front.
It was not about family being honored. It was about which face would look better when the camera zoomed in.
The photographers they engaged for the job was 5 feet away, you know, it was just hopeless. And then the carriage shot, when they went past me in the carriage, they looked the other way. So for me, it was a disaster.
Arthur Edwards, the man who had photographed huge royal moments that changed history, even joked that he needed a GPS just to figure out where his seat was. His view was blocked, and his job was ruined. Imagine giving your life's work to the crown for decades, only to be treated like background decoration while total strangers enjoyed the spotlight. Guests whispered in shock, with some saying the whole thing felt like nothing more than a red carpet networking event. It did not even feel like Windsor Castle anymore. It felt like a shiny Hollywood awards show dressed up in royal clothing. The message was clear. Tradition and loyalty did not matter. What mattered was status and star power. This was not respect for the monarchy. It was open disregard for it. And if guests were hoping that the reception would make up for all the misery, they were about to be disappointed once again.
I've done some really lovely royal weddings. I did both King Charles's weddings. I did William's wedding. I did Andrew's wedding. I did Sophie and Edward. You know, I mean, they were lovely occasions. But that today, I couldn't get out of Windsor quick enough. I promise you that.
The worst royal wedding to cover.
Yeah.
A royal wedding is supposed to be grand, with tables packed full of food, champagne everywhere, and banquets big enough to make headlines. But instead, Meghan and Harry gave guests what could only be called a fancy cocktail hour. Tiny finger foods and little canapes took the place of the huge spreads seen at other royal events. Guests wearing outfits that cost thousands were left picking at tiny bites of avocado toast and macarons, barely enough to fill a child. People whispered in disbelief, shocked that the so-called wedding of the decade did not even feed its guests. Some laughed it off, while others were quietly angry. Edwards himself called the portions pathetic, nothing close to what a monarchy built on tradition, scale, and show should offer. The food felt like a symbol, small, stylish, all for show and without real meaning. And this was not by accident. It was planned minimalism, a performance meant to look trendy and modern in glossy magazine pictures. But in truth, it left people hungry and unimpressed. Instead of royal richness, guests left wanting a real meal. For many, it proved what they already suspected. This was not a royal wedding. It was a public relations act dressed up with crumbs. And as if the heat, the bad seating, and the weak snacks were not enough, Prince Harry turned the whole wedding into a personal grudge.
I felt so. I felt it wasn't just me, it was the whole of the British press. You know, they were in many ways badly treated. I think it was, Harry was angry with us really because some of the things that have been said about Meghan, and quite rightly, some of the things that were said about Meghan during the engagement were pretty harsh.
That was no accident. It was Harry's chosen way of punishing the British media, who he blamed for Meghan's bad treatment in the press. Instead of rising above it, he used the wedding as a weapon against them. The result was a day that should have been about joy and unity, but was spoiled by small-minded hostility. This was not a man showing duty. It was a man full of anger, putting grudges ahead of history. If the royals trusted him to honor tradition, Harry made it clear he wanted to fight. Royal weddings are supposed to mix grand pageantry with centuries of rituals, symbols that keep the monarchy strong. Instead, Meghan and Harry tore those traditions apart and replaced.
When William was born and Harry was born and George and Charlotte and Louis, we got great pictures outside the hospital, I remember. And William and Catherine especially, they made such an effort to show the whole world their new baby.
Instead of welcoming the press, something every monarch before him understood as part of duty, Harry gave angry looks at the cameras, dodged angles, and even moved his body to block photos. For Arthur Edwards and the other photographers working that day, it was a nightmare. They were not dealing with a future king. They were dealing with a sulking celebrity acting out. Every time tradition called for a smile or a graceful pose, Harry turned away or blocked the shot, almost daring the photographers to try to catch something useful. Edwards, who had easily photographed Charles, Diana, William, and Kate, admitted this was the first royal wedding where not even one decent photo came out.
To say, though, you know, that first year of Meghan, working with her on the road, you know, we went all over the country. She was incredible. I mean, I thought she was a great asset to the family.
From the sermon that sounded more like a Hollywood speech to the American-style performances added into the ceremony, everything shouted, "Look at us," instead of "Honor the crown." It was not the sacred flow of past royal weddings. It was a rebrand. Edward saw it right away. Nothing about the day showed the steady strength of the monarchy. It felt like a staged event put together for the world's press. Traditions that once showed loyalty and unity were cut out, brushed off as old-fashioned, and replaced with flashy moments meant to stir chatter on social media. For many guests, the meaning was painful. This was not like Charles and Diana setting royal destiny or William and Kate blending tradition with modern style. This was Meghan and Harry making a statement, saying, "We're different. We don't need the family, and we don't want their rules."
I knew they'd be seething. I knew the Queen would be seething. I knew that the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles would be seething. It would be so unfair.
What should have been a royal celebration became a declaration of independence, one that mocked the very institution that was paying for it. By breaking from tradition, they were not being creative. They were destroying connections. Once the confetti was gone, the so-called fairy tale fell into cold silence. Meghan and Harry did not just step away from the royal family. They slammed the door and locked it tight. Invitations to stay at royal estates were turned down, with Harry insisting on hotels and private security so he could stay in control. Family get-togethers grew fewer and fewer. Grandparents who wanted nothing more than time with Archie and Lilibet were shut out, left to watch their grandchildren grow up like strangers.
First pictures of Archie that was taken by the Press Association. I remember showing her on my phone, and that was the first time she saw him, you know, so it was a difficult time.
So Edward said it was heartbreaking. A whole generation of young royals was missing out on cousins, traditions, and family bonds that had always shaped the royal legacy. What made it hurt even more was the hypocrisy. Meghan and Harry spoke nonstop about how important family and compassion were, yet they kept their own children away from their relatives. For them, privacy was not about protection. It was a shield to block the royals while they sold their story to the world.
Then when the baby was born, when Archie was born, that was another, in my view, a disaster, because I knew we was not going to get a picture of it. Everybody was hoping we would get pictures of it.
It had not brought families together. It had split them even more. Every cold shoulder, every refusal to talk, every insult chipped away at the hope of making peace. What started as a glamorous show ended as a campaign of separation. For the royals, it felt like betrayal dressed up as independence. For the children, it was nothing but loss. If the wedding was a performance, then the Oprah interview was the encore, and it was twice as harsh. Meghan and Harry sat in front of cameras not to fix things, but to blow them up. They threw out claims of racism and cruelty against the royal family, painting themselves as victims in a one-sided story where no one else was allowed to speak. Edwards called it exactly what it was, a stunt. Not a real talk, not a mission for truth, but a staged attack meant to keep the spotlight stuck on them.
It's one of the saddest things of all, Matt, of course, is that the children don't get to see their grandfather. That's really so awful, because they're not getting to meet their cousins and to know their cousins. Such a shame for them.
The timing said everything. When sympathy for them was fading, when their star power was starting to dim, they created a scandal big enough to take over headlines for weeks. The interview was never about making peace. It was about money, publicity, and building their brand. Millions tuned in thinking they would hear honesty. What they really saw was a carefully planned script meant to embarrass the monarchy and lift Team Sussex up as victims. And the result? Families pulled even further apart, trust buried so deep it could not be repaired, and centuries of royal dignity dragged into Oprah's backyard. For Meghan and Harry, none of that mattered. The chaos guaranteed coverage, and coverage meant staying relevant. It was not a confession, it was an extraction, a royal meltdown packaged as primetime drama. And that became the true legacy of Meghan and Harry's wedding. Not a celebration, not a moment of unity, but the opening act of a long-running circus. What the world believed was a sparkling fairy tale was, behind the cameras, a boiling scandal fueled by arrogance. Guests baked in the heat, loyal royals were pushed aside for nameless celebrities, the food was laughable, and photographers were punished just for doing their jobs. Instead of honoring centuries of tradition, the couple used the stage as a launchpad for their global brand. And once the wedding ended, they cashed in with staged interviews, public tantrums, and family division. Every move shouted power play. Every choice chipped away at dignity. They did not join the monarchy. They hijacked it and set it on fire in front of millions. But here is the twist. This wedding disaster was not just the start. It was the blueprint. The chaos, the drama, the showbiz, it never ended. Meghan and Harry turned scandal into money, and the world watched in disbelief. If you thought this breakdown was rough, wait until you see how Trevor Noah hilariously tears Meghan Markle apart on live TV. That video is already up right now on Star Spotlight. Click it because you really do not want to miss what he says.